First of all, where are the Russian strikes directed now? You said earlier that one of the targets is Ukrainian airfields.
I said this when, in fact, the attack took place on one of our airfields, on an operational airfield on that day. On another day, the target may be changed. But I note that the airfields of the Air Force are constantly attacked by the enemy. That is, the enemy understands that our pilots will strike effectively thanks to the weapons they have today. These are, in particular, British, French, American weapons, which allows us to clearly and effectively hit enemy targets on the front line and to the enemy's territory, which is extremely important for us. We have this accuracy. If the Russians take en masse using a large number of UAVs, then our pilots use high-precision weapons provided by partners, in particular from Soviet aircraft from the fleet that we have today, such as Su and MiG, and its effectiveness has been proven. Therefore, aviation pesters, let's say, the enemy. And thanks to the support of partners, I will name these missiles Storm Shadow, Scalp. These are anti-radar AGM-88 HARM. Also French guided bombs, Hammer. And American GBU-39, GBU-62, JDAM, which our pilots use quite effectively on the front line today.
As for the new tactics of the Russians, we have been seeing it for several months. They launch strike UAVs in large groups. How does this process take place in general? Where does it begin? Let's say, at what interval do they launch these shards? And what are the features of such tactics in general? At what altitude do drones fly?
After all, you can read how they launch in various monitoring publics. And we also have, in fact, the main source of information for the media. We have Telegram, Viber, WhatsApp, where our duty communication departments notify about the danger from the air around the clock. So balanced, without such allegories, inflections, as others can afford. But in our country this is an official source of information we are referred to by the media, so without unnecessary information we must inform citizens in simple words where the danger comes from. Actually, it happens every night. Shaheds are dangerous. They start from different directions. These are Ural, Kursk, Milairovo, Shartalovo, Bryansk, Primorsko, Akhtarsk, Chowda, and temporarily the occupied territories that are under the enemy. From there are also launches of enemy UAVs such as Shahd. These are the directions. After all, the launch sites are not that important. It is important how many of these weapons the enemy will release, whether it will combine a Shahd strike with missiles. We see an increase in the number of attack UAVs recently, which they use together with simulated drones, which imitate the Shaheds themselves. Therefore, we have already seen such anti-records, and up to 500 together in a heap. Simulators and attack UAVs deliver one blow. The tactics have changed somewhat. It used to be like this, but they still realize that mobile fire groups armed with small arms can be bypassed, climbing higher. That is, they are inaccessible to small arms, to small caliber machine guns such as Canik or Browning, and attack mostly in a large group at once some object. There may be dozens of UAVs that are produced, and dive at this object in one place or another. The enemy has been using such tactics lately, which really complicates the work of air defense as a whole. Because, in addition to mobile fire groups, electronic warfare equipment is also working, and ambulance missile forces, air defense units of the ground forces, aviation, ground forces, army aviation and air forces are working. Thus, with all available means, even interceptor drones, the air defense of all defense forces is attempting. I emphasize that this is not only the Air Force, the goal is to destroy as many drones flying over these objects as possible.
You mentioned decoy drones. To understand when 300 to 500 drones are flying, how many of these drones are deceptions in percentage terms, because we remember that Russia began to use them against Ukraine along with real shards in the fall of 2024. And, as a rule, these Gerber-type UAVs are made, of course, from cheap materials, do not have a warhead, or carry a small charge. We understand that, perhaps, it is difficult to distinguish them from ordinary shards. So how many of them do they launch, and how do they differ? Can they be distinguished?
It is very easy to distinguish them when they fall to the ground. This is an obvious difference, and in the sky they are imitators for this because they completely simulate shard radars. That is, they have such features inside. I will not go into subtlety there, so that it is clear to the viewers. It is noticeable on radar, on our monitors, like the same shard. Already when they approach the units that will shoot them down, destroy or suppress them with electronic warfare, it becomes clear by sound or visual that something other than a SHAHED 136 or SHAHED 131 is already flying. Accordingly, rational means are used to neutralize it. By various methods, it can be either shot down or suppressed, and so on. Therefore, the enemy uses these simulators to complicate the air situation for us in order to overload air defense. Ideally, we also spend some material resources, that is, we mean either a missile or the same cheetah began to shoot at it in order to deplete our fire reserves. As for the percentages, we can say that more than half are Shaheds. Less than half are imitation drones. You can say 60 to 40, but different cases occur according to the circumstances, according to the tasks that the enemy sets for himself. We take a recent, massive attack on the capital, where there were a total of 322 means of air attack. These are missiles and drones. Among them were 315 drones. And more than 250 were Shaheds. This is already a fairly large percentage in favor of the Shaheds. Of those 250, most flew to the capitals of Ukraine. This ratio can change on one day or another, according to what tasks the enemy sets for himself.
If we talk about numbers, how many shards does Russia produce per day now? Because earlier Western media wrote that they could produce up to 1,000 UAVs per day. Is this really information that corresponds to reality?
It was not ours, even the media wrote, it was our bloggers, figures, volunteers who talked about such figures. Here you can only make assumptions. Therefore, the Air Force does not have these figures. We have intelligence that reports on the enterprises that work, how many shifts, and so on. There are certain forecasts for an increase in production, its intensification. We'll see. Now we have results up to 500, which were extreme strikes. But I emphasize this, together with imitation drones. Because I didn't talk about any thousands of drones, as this media recently presented. Because, you see, you need to check the sources of information. But still, we must prepare for a potential increase in these funds.
Did the Russians have problems with the manufacture of these drones? Because, we remember, our strikes on Russian airfields were cool. The whole world must have admired these strikes. And the factories for the production of mines are also suffering. So are their stocks of these missiles and drones decreasing?
They decrease when they are applied intensively, firstly. Secondly, they can decrease after successful operations of our special services, defense forces. It is we all who are really watching with admiration when something burns on Russia, something that makes a lethal weapon against us. This is obvious. And perhaps we would like Western partners to influence all these things with effective sanctions that should stop the supply of components without which they cannot produce these deadly weapons. It is clear that in any case they will get these components by smuggling through third countries. Russia has very serious experience in illegal transactions and so on. This is a state for which the norms of international law are absolutely not written. Therefore, it is not possible to hope that it will stop completely. But there may be some complications because our specialists, I mean certain relevant departments, collect together the entire archive of information on the use of components of foreign states, which Russia cannot produce. And all this is provided to partners in order to complicate, at least, the further supply of this or that component. But effective sanctions, everyone knows, everyone understands, it is possible to stop Russian aggression and the production of a large number of weapons by Russia. These are, of course, economic sanctions. This is Russia's oil and gas sector, their industry, which brings tens of billions of dollars to the treasury that Russia spends on aggression against Ukraine. Therefore, the banking sector and the oil and gas industry are the key things that ensure Russia's aggressive war. Therefore, the leadership of the state constantly emphasizes here, it is necessary to work as a partner in this regard.
And in the same way, during such massive Russian attacks, our reserves, let's say, are also depleted. Do you want to understand what air defense we need most now?
We need all air defense because there are no such intense battles anywhere in the whole world as against Ukraine. I mean all in its echelon. That is, we have layered air defense, which today is provided by both aircraft and ground assets. Let's start with the fact that both F-16, MiG-29, and Su-27 fighters are involved in repelling air strikes. Aviation is also part of air defense. Also, as know-how, in the Ukrainian war, army aviation helicopters and other defense forces that destroy Shaheds have become part of the air defense. You probably see these shots. Also, mobile fire groups have become a kind of not new, but established in Ukraine new means of shooting down air targets. Who took the lion's share of the downing? From the time of their creation, their improvement was going on. They took this share of the destruction of the Shaheds, because they also shoot down missiles with MANPADS, not with machine guns, but with MANPADS. Mobile fire groups are also something new that was invented by Ukraine. Further, electronic warfare systems that are powerfully developing, there are manufacturers in Ukraine. Western partners also help to ensure that electronic warfare systems work powerfully and protect our facilities, our cities from enemy raids, thus suppressing the GPS signal. And the so-called spoofing works. Next, we have air defense of the ground forces. This is small air defense and anti-aircraft missile forces, I mean, the Air Force. This, in fact, everyone in their echelon must ensure the destruction of the target by the most rational means of shooting. But I deliberately named another way to shoot down enemy UAVs today. This is our drone air defense, which is being implemented, which is being scaled up today in all defense forces. The first to master it, of course, on the front line was not the Air Force, but the ground forces, border guards, the forces of unmanned systems, the special operations forces and others, which are doing everything to reduce the number of enemy eyes, reconnaissance UAVs, first of all, which hang over the front line by the dozens. And now the Air Force also has trained crews. They are preparing them now and inviting newly created drone air defense operators, anti-aircraft drones, as we call them, to their ranks to join their ranks. So that already inside the country, not only on the front line, but also inside the country, protect with the help of this method from enemy attacks by Shaheds. Because there are already certain good indicators of shooting down Shaheds, in fact, in this way. Drone in drone, as it is called.
Very interesting. Of course, we want our Western partners to be able to apply the sanctions you talked about against Russian energy, and to help us again with air defense systems so that we can defend ourselves and we have something to fight back during such massive attacks. Thank you very much for this conversation, for the clarification and, first of all, thank you in your face to our air defense forces, thanks to which we can communicate with you now. Let me remind you that we talked with the head of the Communication Department of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Yurii Ihnat. Thank you.